identify with those qualities, recognize them in yourself, befriend them, then they tend to take on a much, much softer texture, and they become much, much less problematic, and much, much less likely to be projected. And then, because once you have a world full of your own projections, then it's very hard to stay in the now. Because anytime, your boss or your partner or monster-like figures come into your awareness, you lose track of now, and you're off and running with these projections. So these psychological unconscious aspects are one of the primary items that pull you out of now awareness. And so they're one of the primary things that we want to work with. And we also know this. It's important to work with shadow elements, because you can make a fair amount of progress in now awareness, and yet still not have taken care of shadow elements. And so we know a lot of people that are long-term meditators and still have really severe shadow issues. And so they're just sort of forcing attention over ignoring those shadow elements. And what we want to do is just acknowledge them right up front, get in there, befriend them, and re-own them. So once that happens, then also you can stay in the now and make progress in resting in the now in a much, much more stable and efficient way.
So one of the things that really keeps people out of the now is this unresolved shadow stuff.
Right.
And one way to describe this for people to make it even more clear, I think, would be to say, if there are people who, you're always bugged by a certain kind of people or a certain kind of situation, there is probably a shadow aspect of yourself involved. And the same thing could be said about if you always feel attracted to and you're kind of putting on a pedestal or idealizing a certain characteristic in people. That could be a positive shadow part of you, a part of you that you have disowned and pushed down. And both of them are very valuable to work with, and both of them could keep you from being able to be in that now moment, including the positive projections.
Yes, that's exactly right. And both of those are really important to spot and to notice and to work with. And one of the easiest ways is at the end of each day, just review the day. And in your own mind's eye, think of who it was that bothered you the most and who it was that attracted you the most. And those are two good images to work with in this shadow technique. And the same thing when you wake up. Just review the dream state and see what images annoyed you, or frightened you, terrified you even. And then on the other hand, which things you found incredibly, overpoweringly attractive. It's not to say that the boss isn't controlling. It's to say that but other people don't get upset by the boss being controlling. Why do you get upset? You will get upset if and only if you're projecting your own controlling aspects onto the boss. And so it's not to say that these negative and positive aspects aren't really out there in the world, because they certainly can be. It's that if you also have these and you project them onto these people, then you'll see twice the amount of stuff that's out there. And that's what's going to bother you.
Yeah, if you're triggered by these kind of people and other people that are around you aren't triggered by them, they're
right.
noticing those people. But if it's not a shadow aspect for them, they just notice them, and they don't go
right.
nuts about it.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're working in the now and working with that. Another aspect which we can mention is a little bit more complicated, but it's a relatively simple idea, and that is people that start working with the now moment often leave out an important factor, because what they'll start to say is things like, Well, if everybody lived in the now, then the world would basically be without problems. Because it's people that aren't living in the now, that are living in the past, living in the future, creating anxiety, creating all sorts of negative emotions, and they take those negative emotions out on the world, and that's where all the world's problems come from. So if we just all lived in the now, then all of our problems would essentially be taken care of. And what that overlooks is this, and that's also very common in the world's mystical traditions. It's just if I can live in the now, all problems are solved. But this is where another important discovery of the West needs to be added to a truly integral or comprehensive picture of my own spiritual practice if I want to actually make practice. And that's the notion of that there aren't just states of consciousness, like being in a state of now awareness, but there are stages of consciousness. There are structures of consciousness, and these develop. States of consciousness generally don't develop, although if they're trained, they can. But states of consciousness are things like waking, dreaming, deep formless sleep, ever-present now awareness, and those states of consciousness tend to come and go. Structures of consciousness, on the other hand, tend to develop. They develop in stages. And one of the first Westerners to point this out and discover this was Gene Gebser, and he called these stages, which are stages that actually humanity have gone through, and stages that individuals go through. Even to this day, everybody born today goes through these stages. And they're archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral. And what happens there is, if we actually look at these stages of development, and we look at the mythic stage, that's the stage of traditional values, of fundamentalists, and the notion that Moses really parted the Red Sea, Christ was really born of a biological virgin, and so on. But those are the basis of traditional values. Rational stage is the basis of modern values, modern science, modern scientific research, the modern Western Enlightenment, and so on. Pluralism is the basis of postmodern values, and that includes, multiculturalism and multicultural sensitivity and relativism and pluralism and so on. And those three stages right there are the basis of culture wars in our culture. It's basically traditional values versus modern values versus postmodern values. And so what's going to happen there is all three of those stages. People can be at all three of those stages and get in touch with the now moment. And they're still going to be coming from those stages. So it's important to recognize that what the world needs is not just having people get in touch with the now moment, but have people develop through these stages.
Absolutely, absolutely. So whatever stage a person is at, they are going to, if they have an experience, including the experience of the now moment, they are going to interpret that now moment from the stage that they're at.
Exactly.
And so why don't you describe kind of how each of those three stages would interpret that kind of a now moment transcendent experience?
Yes, somebody at the mythic fundamentalist stage would interpret this as an experience of absolute truth given to basically one and only one group of people, because the traditional stage of development is very ethnocentric, and so it believes in God's chosen people, and it believes it tends to be very